Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Today we will discuss about the another part of second chapter, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plant. So today we will discuss about the pollen grain. So what is pollen grain? Pollen grain is a microscopic structure that represents the male gametophytes. I think you all notice the pollen grain. How you notice pollen grain? If you touch a flower like hibiscus or any other flowers, you can observe a yellowish deposition on your finger. This yellowish deposition is known as pollen grain. So pollen grains are usually 25 to 50 micrometers in diameter. It has a prominent two-layer wall, that is XII and Ncert. That is, the outer layer is known as XII and the inner wall by inner layer is known as Ncert. So what is XII? The hard outer layer called the XII is made up of sporopollenin, which is the most resistant organic material known. So what is sporopollenin? Sporopollenin is one of the most chemically inert biological polymers. What is the composition of sporopollenin? The composition of sporopollenin is mainly long chain fatty acids, phenyl propanoids, phenolics and traces of carotenoids. It can withstand high temperature and strong acids and alkali. That means the sporopollenin can resist the high temperature and strong acid and alkali also. No enzyme that degrades sporopollenin is so far known. That means still we don't know what enzyme can degrade or destroy sporopollenin. Pollen grain XII has prominent aperture germ pores where sporopollenin is absent. That means in pollen grain where sporopollenin is absent is known as germ pores. Pollen grains are well preserved as fossils because of the presence of sporopollenin. As we know, sporopollenin is a highly resistant substance. As sporopollenin is present in pollen grains, that's why sporopollenin is well preserved as fossils. Now what is Ncert? The inner wall of pollen grain is called Ncert. It is thin and continuous layer made up of cellulose and pectin. That means the composition of Ncert is cellulose and pectin. The cytoplasm of pollen grain is surrounded by plasma membrane. When the pollen grains mature, it contains two cells, the vegetative cells and the generative cells. Now what is vegetative cells? Vegetative cell is bigger, has abundant food reserve and a large irregularly shaped nucleus. That means vegetative cells is bigger than the generative cells and it has a abundant food reserve, and the nucleus which is present in vegetative cells, that is irregular in shape. What is generative cells? The generative cell is small and floats in the cytoplasm of the vegetative cells. That means the generative cells is smaller than the vegetative cells and it floats on the cytoplasm of vegetative cell. It is spindle shaped with dense cytoplasm and a nucleus. That means the cytoplasm that of generative cells is dense in nature and a nucleus is present in generative cells. When once they are shed, pollen grains have to land on the stigma before they have to bring about fertilization. That means when the pollen grains are shed, at first they fall on the stigma. After falling on the stigma, it enters into the ovary and it fertilizes. The period for which pollen grains remain viable is highly variable and to some extent depends on the prevailing temperature and humidity. That means the existence of the pollen grains depends on the temperature and humidity. Here this is the structure of pollen grains. This is pollen grains and here stages of microspore maturing into pollen grains. This is vegetative cells and this is generative cells. Now the advantages of pollen grains, or how we use pollen grain. Pollen grains are rich in nutrients. It is used as pollen tablets as food supplement. As pollen grains are rich in nutrients, it's used as a food supplement. And another use of pollen grains are, in Western countries, a large number of pollen products in the form of tablets and syrup are available in the market. That's mean pollen grains also used in the medicinal field and used as a composition of medicine like syrup or tablets. And another, how people use pollen grains? Pollen consumption has been claimed to increase performance of athletes and race horses. That's mean if someone consumed pollen grains, their athletes' performance will increases. Now the disadvantages of pollen grains. Pollen grains of many species cause severe allergies and bronchial affections in some people, often leading to chronic respiratory disorders like asthma and bronchitis, etc. That's mean if anyone or any people are suffering the chronic disorders like asthma or bronchitis, if they came contact with the pollen grains, they will suffer in some allergies, reactions or bronchial affections. So the people who have asthma or bronchitis, they should avoid to inhale pollen grains or touch, and they have not touched the pollen grains.